Hello and welcome to Book Connotation Points video snark. In July 2020, I began reading a book series recommended to me called the Stalking Jack the Ripper series. I began by doing the first book, Stalking Jack the Ripper, on YouTube, and then I promised that I was going to finish the series over on my Patreon since I didn't have time to do an entire series on YouTube. A couple of people have since asked for updates about it, apparently having completely missed my memo about what I was going to be doing. But as I finished up the Stalking Jack series, I thought, you know what, I started Stalking Jack on YouTube, I might as well do a video just to bring some people closure about what I thought of the rest of the series. And this is that video. We begin with hunting Prince Dracula, which picks up where we left off at the end of the first book. Audrey and Thomas are going to Romania to some medical training school. Before the plot can even kick off, Thomas says that he's half Romanian on his mother's side, which is simultaneously a giant case of how convenient, but I also thought that it was mildly interesting. It's just little stuff like that that gives characters life, and unlike Audrey constantly whining and dropping the fact that she's a quarter Indian in the first book, Thomas's heritage is actually relevant to the plot. The actual plot kicks off with a series of murders that makes it seem as though the resident cryptoid Dracula or Vlad the Impaler actually do exist. But because humans are inherently stupid by nature, this throws the local townspeople into a panic. Now I'd like to pause for a moment to tell you the setting of this story. The medical school was once an old castle. It's drafty and full of secret passages. It's also just before Christmas. However, despite the fact that Thomas and Audrey literally tracked from another country just to attend, their attendance is not necessarily guaranteed. And I get that you only want the best of the best for your school and everything, but they're only going to be admitting 2 students at a time. Which, that's no way to run a school. Why don't you just set up shop in your home then? Why do you need a giant castle for all of this? None of these things are even remotely addressed, and I'm left wondering if the author has completely and utterly checked out from reality. Anyway, the headmaster of the school is somebody that I also need to introduce you to, because from the second that he's introduced, he's set up to be the antagonist. He's worse than the actual murderer. But put a pin into that thought because we'll return to it in a moment. Pop quiz time! You are the headmaster of a medical school. Bodies of your students are starting to pile up. What do? A. You should totally enlist the help of your remaining students and help the Royal Guard solve these vicious crimes. Or B. Sit back, whine about women, and do absolutely nothing. If you answered A, then congratulations! You are officially smarter than the headmaster and main teacher of the school. If you answered B, then you've either read the book or you understand how sarcasm works. The headmaster is so set against Audrey and Thomas trying to solve the murders that he actively chides them on multiple occasions for getting in the way of the royal guards. By the time that the book was over, I honestly was more than a little glad that Thomas and Audrey were not the chosen ones for the school. Because, seriously, who would want to learn under this guy? Not only is he a steaming pile of self-serving, misogynistic poop, but he is also actively telling people not to investigate a series of murders. That is literally happening at his school. I'm sorry, but I'm not sure that I'll ever be over how stupid that the entire thing was. Anyway, to make the overly long and tedious story short, it turns out that there was a group of people who think that the current Romanian royal family are a bunch of usurpers, and they're going around killing them. And for some reason, half of the current royal family are trying to get into the Swan Medical School. And then there was this book of codes and all these underground tunnels and rooms under the castle. One of them are full of giant spiders, others have bats in them. One of them fills up with water and they almost get trapped until Audrey can solve the puzzle. And on the face of it, I do enjoy adventures like this. Everybody loves Indiana Jones, but the problem is that by the time that we get to this point, we've had to slog through all of this super unnecessary nonsense with Thomas and Audrey flirting with each other, the headmaster's continuous refusal to do literally anything, and the problem with actually piecing together the stuff from the aforementioned book. So by the time that we do get to the actual adventure part of the story, I'm so done with it that I just want to scream at it to get to the point. And you'll probably remember me commenting on how I felt like Nathaniel being Jack the Ripper kind of came out of nowhere with no build-up to it. And apparently the author felt no need to actually change for hunting Prince Dracula, since the ending was pretty much the same. Although I will say one thing about the killer, and at least she'd faked her own death early on. So at least it kind of made sense that none of them even considered her to be the killer, but at the same time, the entire ending seemed like it was just kind of pulled out of nowhere. There wasn't a whole lot of build up to her being the killer, no clues dropped that she might have still been alive, just surprise! It was me! Oh, and Thomas's sister makes an appearance in this book, and she's a lesbian. Neither the sister nor her sexuality serve any purpose whatsoever, but I just thought that I'd throw it out there. It's not actual representation if you could remove the two lesbian characters and the plot would literally not change at all. In the third book, escaping from Houdini, Audrey and Thomas rejoin with Audrey's uncle and sail across the pond to go work a case in New York. However, as everybody on board the ship is enjoying the evening's entertainment of a circus, the young girl sitting next to Audrey is literally murdered. Now, this is where things start to go from, yeah, this is a bad series, to wow, just wow. I don't even have words anymore. This series is just the worst. They are literally on a ship in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. There are no port stops, no taking on extra passengers or letting people off. This is something that the book itself acknowledges at several points. It is literally a closed room murder. Now, if you're like me, you're probably thinking, okay, so the combined brain skills of Uncle Audrey and Thomas should be more than enough to solve this quickly, right? It's literally a closed room murder. But if you were actually paying attention to my read through of the first book and then paying attention to what I just said about hunting Prince Dracula, solving the murder is second to literally everything else. In this book, some of the prime suspects are the circus performers. Audrey strikes up a strange relationship with the ringmaster, a man who goes by the name of Mephistopheles. Please note that in my Patreon review, I literally could not be bothered to learn how to spell that, so I just called him Metaphysics. Most of the book is devoted to Audrey making goo-goo eyes and kissy faces at Metaphysics while Thomas looks on with a bitter jealousy. She does this because reasons, basically. There's some finer details about card tricks and sleight of hand, but it literally does not even matter. Audrey decided that her relationship with Thomas was clearly not important enough for her. Neither was a literal growing pile of bodies. As I said earlier, a criminal expert for the time and his two young students could not solve this murder, mainly because they didn't seem to be trying. Now, a big part of the book was focused around the circus performers. There was a huge ensemble cast introduced for this book. And don't get me wrong, I'm the girl who grew up loving X-Men. I love me a slew of complex characters, each bringing something interesting to the table by way of personality and interesting backstory. But, this ain't X-Men, and every single new character blended together into the next to the point where whenever one would show up, my mind immediately kind of just grouped them into this incoherent flesh-shaped blob of unimportant background characters. It was just not good writing at all. I would challenge the author to make her story more boring than the constant parade of characters whose names, talents, and backstories instantly fled my head the second that they were off the page. But honestly, I've also read books like that, and they aren't good either. Now, normally, me forgetting a minor background character wouldn't be a problem. Literally, nobody cares about these characters, and they are literally not important. Visual red shirts, if you will, needed to flesh out the actual story. Which, as I just finished saying, is needed because if our heroes were actually any good at their jobs, the story would have probably been finished after 2 nights and probably about as many chapters too. But at the big reveal of who the murderer was, I literally yelled out, "Who?" Because all these characters ran together until they became this flesh-shaped background image that was no more important than a travel trunk. I finished the book in October 2020, and it's now January 2021, and even now, I'm struggling to remember which of the various circus performers that it was and the role he played. Mainly because the book itself didn't seem to care. It was so busy trying to wrap up the Metaphysics Audrey Thomas love triangle that it literally forgot that it was a murder mystery. And speaking of the love triangle, the book ended on a really weird note, with Thomas and Audrey not in a good place because of Audrey mucking around with Metaphysics. And I would have been fine with them rekindling their romantic relationship at the start of the fourth book, Capturing the Devil, except the author apparently forgot that she'd written that and just went straight to them being lovey-dovey and wanting to hurry up to the altar, which is super frustrating to me because I don't want to see the happy ending so quickly. I want them to fight for their relationship. And because it was named Escaping from Houdini, yes, the titular Harry Houdini did make an appearance, but he was grouped in with all the other flesh-shaped background characters. His entire role could have been replaced with literally anybody else and the plot would not have changed. Time to go back to the drawing board because that's just an awful title. Now, I literally just finished reading Capturing the Devil, and maybe the thoughts are a little bit fresher in my mind because of it, but I'm gonna try and streamline my thoughts about the book. The book opens with Audrey, Thomas, and Uncle arriving in New York where they're faced with a string of murders that remind them way too much of the Jack the Ripper killings. But Jack the Ripper, aka Audrey's brother Nathan L., is dead, right? He was Jack the Ripper, wasn't he? But forget about that. Forget about the bodies that pile up. Audrey and Thomas have a wedding to plan. Except Thomas's father makes an appearance, and his character is apparently that paper-thin, mustache-twirling evil, only there to basically pad out the plot and get the ball rolling. He's there because he only wants Thomas to marry for his own gain, not Thomas's happiness. He threatens Thomas's sister and both of their inheritances as well. He also has a weird letter with Thomas's seemingly forged signature, which promises Thomas's hand in marriage to a character who literally does not even get a forename. And for some reason, the court views this over Thomas's own word, and a priest refuses to marry Thomas and Audrey. And spoiler, but literally by the last page, but Thomas and Audrey still haven't gotten married, despite it being 1 year later, which is really baffling to me, but has nothing to do with anything, so whatever. In a move of pure desperation, Thomas and Audrey somehow convince Uncle that the murderer, whom they have literally been ignoring this entire time, is in Chicago for the World's Fair. And it's not so much that I'm upset over them going to Chicago, but I'm angry at the book chapter titles for spoiling this for me, because the book was broken into two parts named New York and Chicago. And the second I realized they were thinking of going somewhere, I was like, oh gee, I wonder where they're going. Uncle finally draws a line once they're actually in Chicago and tells them that they have a week to actually prove that they should be there, especially considering the fact that there are not actual bodies in Chicago, which I'm really on board with calling Audrey or Thomas out on their nonsense. However, I don't know why he felt the need to wait until they were actually in Chicago to tell them this. He knew exactly what was going on and why they were desperate to leave at once. Except true to form for the rest of the book in the series, not even with the ultimatum of Uncle turning Thomas back over to his father do either of them really do much. The book continues to drag out unnecessarily with distractions such as the newfangled electric lights, the excitement of the World's Fair, and most importantly, Cracker Jacks. Oh my god, this book would not shut up about Cracker Jacks. And then the ending, it was honestly pretty on brand. Like with the previous three books, the ending felt forced and awkward. That the author didn't make a story to suit actual history, but made a story and then randomly decided to cram historical events into it even though nothing fit. And to add insult to injury, the nonsense between Thomas and his father was also resolved with the stupidest, most, oh yeah, I should resolve that way possible, with Thomas striding into the murder hotel where Audrey almost died at the hands of H.H. Holmes and saying, by the way, Queen Vicky publicly humiliated my father, so we can totes get married. But then they don't. However, much like the first half of the book was spent with Audrey and Thomas rushing to get married and then Thomas's evil father and completely and utterly ignoring this serial killer murder mystery aspect, the entire second half barely even remembered the nonsense from what happened not even a week earlier. It was so focused on Audrey and Thomas play acting at being detectives. And in a lot of stories, I enjoy it when it opens on a certain note and then circles around to the same note at the end. However, with the Stalking Jack series, I felt like the circle was unnecessarily interrupted by hunting Prince Dracula and escaping from Houdini. By the time in Capturing the Devil that I realized that we were not yet done with Jack the Ripper, I kind of wanted to chuck something at the author. Why in the world did I suffer through those miserable middle books just to get back to the singular point? There was no reason for any of it. No character development happened. No major bombshells. Just Audrey and Thomas moving about, not solving murders until the author got so bored with her own stories, she mercifully put the book and readers out of their misery. Overall, if I had to pick one thing to describe this series, it would be this awkward moment. I was driving in the car with my boyfriend and I was trying to tell him about a scene that I'd read recently involving a dragon statue being the release for a room filling up with water, but I literally could not remember what it was that it was from, and I sat in the car through about 3 stoplights before I remembered Hunting Prince Dracula. And it's not so much that it's unusual to forget about a book, but the problem is that I had literally just finished the book not even a week earlier, and I had already forgotten about it. A month from now, I know that I will not have one single passing thought about Audrey or Thomas. A year from now, when Goodreads notifications of having finished these books begin to show up in my Facebook memories, I'll be like, oh yeah, I forgot I read that. I still think about Abraham Lincoln sucking Emma Baker's toes from the plan from time to time, but the only thing that I'm probably going to take away from Stalking Jack the Ripper series is a murder mystery series that literally wanted to be anything other than a murder mystery series. Anyway, that's my review. Regular video updates for The Betrothed will continue on as scheduled. Be sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so that you don't miss anything. Also, while you're waiting for the new video, be sure to catch up on my other video series. You can read my Snark of the rest of Stalking Jack series on my Patreon, along with a lot of other bonus Snark that isn't up on my Tumblr. People who donate to me, either by supporting me on Patreon or by making a one-time donation via PayPal or Ko-fi, also get shoutouts in my videos. Thank you so much to Dawn, Phoebe, and Nikki for supporting me already. Be sure to join my Patreon or donate to hear your name next week. Also, if you want to read some of the stuff that I publish, you can purchase my works on Amazon. I have 19 erotic short stories, 1 short story collection, and 1 full-length novel. Links for everything will be posted below. See you guys for my regular weekly video.